Hello, my name is Leah Morgan. I'm the Macmillan Project Manager for the Living With and Beyond Cancer Programme team based at Shrewsbury and Telford Hospitals NHS Trust. I'm joined today by two patient members and a family member to discuss emotional well-being, depression, anxiety, and also what you can do to help yourself. So I'm joined by Angela, Claire and Colin. And you may recognise them because they were on the patient stories at the start. So we're just going to dive right in, if that's okay with everybody. Yeah. So I think first off, if that's okay, we'll talk about the kind of emotions you might feel when going through the whole pathway, because it can be quite a long experience for you, going through treatment, getting that diagnosis, then going through the treatment, and then obviously if your treatment ends, that kind of after feelings as well. So can you think of any kind of feelings that you might go through or that you have been through?
The first one I found was disbelief, really, because I'd never been ill before in my life, and then I was hit with this, and it was as though everything was happening around me, and I wasn't taking anything in myself. So I needed the support really of family to help me through that. So that was the main thing for me to start with, and then from then on it was possibly a little bit of depression, a bit of anxiety, but a whole load of mixed emotions.
And how was it discussing that with your family?
At first it was very hard. I'm a very private person and I don't like sharing things, and it was really hard to actually say, well, I do need your help. Even though I did know that I needed the help, it was hard to actually say it. And then after that it was easier to talk to friends and family outside that I needed the help, and surprisingly I got the help.
That's great to hear.
It was a bit of a roller coaster, a bit like with Colin, and it took me by surprise because I wasn't expecting the news when I went up to the hospital. But I then went into a sense of calm and just let everything carry on around me, and yeah, it was great to have my husband, but as a family we'd already just gone through it with my mother. So it was a bit of a blow, to be fair, to the rest of the family, and I was more concerned about them as we'd just been dealing with my mother. But we all rallied around and we got the help that we needed through various support services, and here I am now.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's great that you were able to have that support from your family, your friends. There may be people out there that don't necessarily have that support system around them, and I think that that's really important to remember as well, but it doesn't mean that they're on their own. We'll talk about a few telephone lines and things that if they did feel they needed that support that they can ring. There is always somebody there to listen, absolutely, but it's great that you were able to have that support around you.
Being a partner of somebody who's been through it, and my husband was sort of in total denial, really, so didn't want to talk to me or anybody else about it, and it was 19 years ago, and there we were unaware of the services that even then did exist, not as much as there is now. And had I known, although he didn't want to discuss it, I would have found it really very helpful. And probably would have, not behaved better, but I would have understood his side of it perhaps a little better.
And I think that the other kind of thing that I do want to point on is that it's completely normal to feel that way as well. That, we have all of these different emotions going on. So if we think about the different kind of emotions, there might be a bit of anger, that might be quite normal to feel. Maybe a little bit of guilt, in the sense of if you go to treatment, for example, and you see somebody that may be a little bit more poorly, and then you're actually, even though you're still poorly yourself, you're a little bit better, or you feel like you're in a bit of a better place than them, that guilt that you may feel, frustration, I'm sure, upset, sad. But then I know that we've spoken before, and we've also spoken about the other side, the other emotions that you might feel. So what kind of emotions might you feel from another side? So instead of the anger and the frustration and upset, what other kind of emotions might you feel, do you think?
once I got over my initial stubbornness, I found that when I did start talking to people and they not so much understood, but they wanted to understand,
Yeah.
and I felt a lot better in myself, really, and I actually quite enjoyed talking to people about it because they were friends and they wanted to listen, and after that they did help, and they also learnt a little bit about it themselves, which may or may not help them in the future life,
Yeah.
but it certainly helped me.
Yeah, I think our daughter has been diagnosed in the last year, and initially she did not wish anybody to know. Her closest friend came to see her immediately on the diagnosis, and she said, "Please, I don't want you to share it with anybody. Please don't tell anybody." And she said, "Why on earth not?" She said, "I don't want people feeling sorry for me." And she said, "This is where you've got it so wrong. People are not feeling sorry for you. They are caring, and they want to do anything they can that might help you. And it's really not a decision for you to make. It's what they want to do, and you have to learn to be gracious." And you know, Colin, you were saying, and I think now she's learning
Yes.
that it is genuinely that people care.
Yes.
Yes.
It takes some time for you to understand
yes,
that as well, but
difficult
To
to get your head
accept it, I
around it.
suppose.
it's that barrier. Once you get over the barrier, you will accept the help from people because it is offered genuinely.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And it is like you say, it's not about people feeling sorry for you at all. It's actually more that people just want to support you because it is a hard time that you're going through. So you know, it's okay to accept that support, absolutely. It's, you know, it's okay to say, oh, actually, yeah, I am. And it's okay to be completely honest with them as well. If you're having a bad day, then don't sugarcoat it for them. Absolutely say, yeah, I'm not having a great day today. It's not always going to be like this, and then I know that, but today it's not a great day. And I think accepting that, you know, don't bottle it up to protect them is what I'm trying to say, I suppose, because actually they wouldn't say you're okay if they didn't want to support you if you're not feeling okay, if that makes sense. So yeah, absolutely. And I think talking about those emotions, and it's a bit like a roller coaster, isn't it? You know, and it can be all of those emotions you could feel just in one day. You could probably feel a few of them in 1 hour. And 1 minute you know you're up here, the next minute you're down here, and then you're round and round, and you don't know front from back. And that's completely normal as well. You know, we all can feel like that, but especially somebody who's going through that cancer diagnosis and treatment, and also after the treatment finishes, which is just as difficult sometimes, because you've been going to somewhere for so long for that treatment, if that you know, you are able to have treatment, you've been going there for so long that when the treatment actually finishes and you're not going to that, what you might see as a support system maybe, it's taken away from you, and then all of a sudden you're like, what do I do, and who do I talk to now? Who can I talk to? And I think that's really important to realise as well, that those emotions don't just stop when treatment stops. It's possible that they just carry on.
Yes. That's where I just really found that I needed the support. Because when all that treatment had finished, I thought, well, what do I do now? Where do I turn to? And that's when it really hit me as to, oh, what have I just been through? What do I do now? So that was where I really needed the support, and where I actually went and looked for the support and found it. So very important that when you finish your treatment, just be aware that might happen.
That things are around and available for you to be able to access.
No, I think that's quite normal for everybody, really, because that's when the anxiety sets in, when the in-place support finishes, and you're just like a rabbit in the headlights. You're looking and you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I certainly found a lot of comfort from the Macmillan support, even though at first I didn't want it. But I used to sneak in and take the little books to read, and it's an eye-opener.
Yeah, absolutely, and there are a lot of, we're lucky enough that Macmillan are able to provide a lot of different types of books for different symptoms or side effects or emotions that you may be feeling, or the loved ones around you may be feeling that you want to better understand. And I think that absolutely going and accessing those resources, I mean, you can either go to the website if you're IT savvy and able to get on the internet, or if that you have the internet, you're able to go on there on the Macmillan website. You can order them and they'll send them out to you for free. So if you didn't want to necessarily go into the support centres that are available, but what I would say is that those Macmillan Information Support Centres, or you may know them as hubs, depending on where your area is, they have people there who are there to listen as well. So it's a drop-in centre. You can go, you can talk to those people, and they're a listening ear when sometimes you just need to talk, whether it be for just 2 minutes or whether it be for half an hour. They're there for you to just go and talk to, and if there may be resources that you didn't know about that they're able to provide.
Yeah, and I wish I'd known that right at the start, and maybe I wouldn't have been so stubborn. But we all learn.
We do, absolutely, we do.
But once I did start reading them, you understand what is normal, and it's not just you being paranoid. It happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
The anxiety, some depression, but it also helps the family members as well, because they're getting anxious because you are, and it's just a knock-on effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So knowing about the support, I think, is important right from the start.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks.
Yes, I think it's just there's a sense of abandonment, I think, at the end of the treatment, because you've had all of the the consultant appointments and this, that and the other, and the treatment, and then suddenly it's all over, and you've not had your own agenda for that period of time. And it could be a year, 18 months. If there's been surgery, there's been chemo, there's been radiotherapy, if it's breast cancer, the Herceptin, and suddenly that's it. And you've got your own agenda back again, but you don't quite know how to deal with it anymore because, the parameters suddenly have all changed again.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So it's a great period of adjustment. Using it.
Yeah, I think sometimes that those feelings of, oh well, I know that it's there and I know I'm allowed to access it, and it's there for me to access, but going into a group situation, for example, so obviously there are group sessions out there that you can attend. It is that nerve-wracking feeling of going into a group that you don't know the people, and it can be quite daunting, and sometimes you want to just go and listen rather than actually take part, but that's okay. I mean, that's absolutely fine, and when you go in there, all of the other people will probably be feeling something very similar to how you have felt as well. So it is getting that confidence in yourself, and it's a lot easier said than done, but getting that confidence to ring. But when you ring and you say, oh, can I come along to whatever group it may be, actually you'll soon realise that they'll be delighted to have you, and they'll be delighted to hear your stories and your experiences, and it's that opportunity of learning off others as well as sharing what you've been through as well. So absolutely, they're there for you to access. So I would absolutely encourage people to do that. So we'll move on to talk about depression, if that's okay with everybody. Can we think about what you think or what you see depression as, or what do you think depression is?
I think depression is a long-term thing that people don't realise. It's a feeling low, feeling worthless sometimes, and wondering why me. And that to me is the main part of it. It's not understanding what's happening to you and worrying about it all the time. And it could be a couple of days, a couple of weeks, but it could go on for quite a long time as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to speak to anybody. I just wanted to be left alone. And that went over quite some time. So that's when I realised something wasn't right.
That's great.
It wasn't myself, it was my husband. And for him, he saw this as a big failure within himself. Whilst he'd been unbelievably understanding about anybody else going through that situation, for himself that wasn't acceptable. He should be able to overcome it. And when someone very close to you is going through a depressive period, I did, maybe not everybody does, but I sort of question, well, had I done something to cause it? And I remember sort of trying to persuade him to talk to me and say, well, is it this, is it that, is it the other? No, it's nothing to do with you, it's you know. Takes the person who's reacting to a person in a deep depression sometimes quite a long time to realise you can't help to it. There's only so much you can do to help until that person reaches a point where they realise what's happening to them and that they are able to seek some help.
I can imagine though that's it's quite a difficult thing for you to see and to watch your loved one go through that depression.
It does, because actually then both of you become isolated. Because you're isolated because you realise you can't do anything. And you're feeling a bit guilty because you can't, even if you want to. And that person, because depression does create a feeling of isolation. In your case, you were saying that's what you wanted.
Yeah.
And that's probably what he wanted. And there's me poking and saying, well, what about this? Or could I, can I not do it? And it's very difficult, actually. It's a very complicated situation.
Until that person gets to the point where they say, actually, I might need a little bit of help here. There is a big difference between feeling low, because that's completely natural, like we were just talking about earlier. There's a big difference between that feeling and then the depression, which is that continuous feeling, and it's about recognising that if you've had it for that period of time, that actually something's not quite right here and maybe I need to go and seek a little bit of help. I can imagine feeling depressed you might feel a little bit hopeless in your life, and a big feeling of, well, it's not fair really. Why me? I can imagine some
There's a
people
bit of
maybe.
that. There is a bit of that, but you don't realise that until after the event. And I know I had to go on to antidepressants just to lift me out of where I was at, crying for no reason, and it just wasn't me. I've always been a happy girl and always had a good laugh and a giggle, but I just wasn't doing that. When the therapist, the counsellor said, I'm going to get in touch with your GP to up your medication because you need it. So having that outside support and help was necessary because I couldn't see it for myself.
And it's getting to that point of realising that help is there and that actually it's time that you access it.
Yes.
But even with mild depression, it's not something you can just snap out of.
No.
You do need the help to get you over that breaking point and to get the support that you need.
I think that realisation that we're all different as well. So it might be that one person might just need a couple of counselling sessions possibly, or somebody to talk to for a couple of times, and to just get over that way that they're feeling at that point, versus somebody who might need that extra little bit of help as well. And you're quite right, it isn't something that you can just snap out of, or what's the other common cliche, pull yourself together, and it's absolutely not something that you can. It is a condition that by seeking that help, you will aim to get into a better place. But it is about realising that in yourself, I think.
So absolutely use the helpline.
Yeah. We'll talk about that helpline in a little while, absolutely. We'll talk about the things that you may be able to access and do for yourself maybe as well to help yourself. What do you think might be some common signs of depression? Just, for people who may actually be going through it, and it may just trigger a couple of things for them to go, oh, actually, Yeah, I felt like that.
I think people withdraw. That, you know, they withdraw from the family. And I think personally, in my personal experience, because my husband saw this as a huge fault within himself, didn't want anybody to know what he was going through. So all of his energies were going into maintaining this persona that everybody knew professionally. So then at home there was an empty shell, because you have only got so much energy that you know to give. So I think for us as a family it was the withdrawal of the person we knew.
Absolutely. And you were talking about before about the isolation as well. So when they withdraw, they become isolated, and then they may not mean to, but they may isolate family, friends, or those around them, as what they feel is a coping mechanism, when actually could be something a lot deeper, really.
It's a lot harder to put one step in front of the other, and you just haven't got the energy to be that person you used to be. You just want to be left alone and almost wallow, but it's not wallowing, it's just you don't know how to get out of it. Just feel low and sad the whole time, and you can't sleep very well, and there's all sorts of things going on in your head.
Can affect your sleep quite badly, I can imagine. Which obviously, going through everything else as well, especially if you are on treatment, or you've just finished and you're, at any point in your pathway actually, and you're feeling that fatigue, when actually rest is really, really important, to then not be able to have that rest because of everything else that I can imagine is going on in your mind.
Your mind just doesn't switch off.
Absolutely.
Another big thing, I think, is the lack of interest in anything. Just can't be bothered attitude.
Yeah.
It may be that you think you can do it tomorrow or the next day, but it just goes on and on like that. You don't want to do anything, and that should be a big turning point. But people just think, well, I'll be okay tomorrow.
Yeah.
But quite often they're not.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite common. Is, well, we'll see how I feel tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm sure that this is just a little blip, and tomorrow I'll feel much better. And in some cases it may be that, but it's about recognising that if it's not, that's the time then to access that support. Absolutely. People, I can imagine, might feel a bit tearful, maybe guilt-ridden sometimes, maybe they have no appetite. So it's a mixture of different things that can really affect you, but it's about, like I say, the biggest thing is that recognition that you were talking about, Claire. Absolutely. And so I think it's important to realise that there's a big range as well. So it might be that somebody may feel mildly depressed, of that continuous low feeling. And what we would say is if somebody is having that continuous low feeling for around 2 weeks or longer, that's the point where really it's that point where you should be accessing that support around you. And if you're not aware of where that support is, go to your GP, or if you are still within the hospital, speak to if you've got a key worker or a clinical nurse specialist, then speak to those that are in the hospital. And if you're really lost, then go to the Macmillan Information Support Centre, like we were talking about. They will be able to direct you in the way that you need to go. And so I think it's really important to realise that there's those mild depressive states, and then it can get a lot more serious, and we can sometimes get to severe depression, where people may feel like they may want to harm themselves, or even suicidal thoughts. And if that is the case, and if anybody's going through that, it is absolutely important that straight away that you go and seek that help. There is people that can absolutely help you and give you that support to get you through that stage.
Well, I'm glad that I got those coping mechanisms in place when I had them. because I was going down that route. Thankfully, I didn't. So yeah, it certainly is a feeling that is quite possible.
So we'll move on now to maybe talk about some things that we may be able to do for ourselves. And I know that sounds so ironic when you're feeling so low about actually I could do something to help myself. But I think if you maybe start absolutely alongside gaining that access to support, doing a few things to help yourself, what do you think that you might be able to do?
Well, I made myself go out. I made myself go for a short walk or to potter in the garden, and that sort of helped to lift my moods to a certain extent. But it was definitely something that worked for me. It was getting out and about a bit more. Even though I didn't feel like it, I actually did it and felt better for it.
Yeah, the mixture of the fresh air, I can imagine, with a little bit of physical activity.
Yeah.
Because obviously with physical activities, not to get too scientific, but obviously that does release things called endorphins, and that does make you feel better in yourself when those are racing around your body. So absolutely, we would say physical activity is a real big benefit of what you can do to help yourself.
For me, it was taking up an interest that I'd never had before. It was probably a boyhood fantasy of model making.
Oh.
It didn't turn out well, but it got me into thinking that, well, it is helping by actually doing something. And that's when I took up baking, and I've stuck with the baking, and I'm still doing it now to this day. So I think you've tried one of them.
I am guilty.
But going along the exercise theme, I was lucky enough that my wife let us have a dog.
Hey.
And getting out for a walk with the dog every day, it was absolutely brilliant. And it also made me meet more people, as dogs do. And I slowly did normal life as I used to enjoy it. So.
And did you build that time? Did you build that up over time? Did you do a little shorter walk and then build up as you built your strength, or?
Yes, I was still in the recovery phase, so I was building myself up, but taking the dog made me push myself just that little bit further, which did help in the end, and he enjoyed the walks as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I think it's really important to recognise that it is about building that strength up and recognising that, I know that you always say, Colin, is wherever you go, you've got to come back.
Yes.
And recognising that you need to remember that, because it's about recognising that and being able to complete the whole walk.
Yeah.
Walking down the hill, remember you've got to walk back up again.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And it's about making sure that you're able to recognise that in yourself and tell yourself it's okay that if you walk a little, only just a little bit, you should be very proud of that, and then walk a little bit further the next time and just build really slowly but surely, just build it up over time.
And if you keep a record of how much you do, it's surprising how much in a fortnight you realise how much you got better, and then that spurs you on to do more again. Still not pushing yourself too much, but just that little bit, push the boundaries a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that I always talk about is a diary, and anything can go in that diary. And like you say, where did you walk that? How far did you walk that day? How you were feeling that day, even, because maybe that's something that you can do if you are starting to feel a bit low. Look back and jot down memories. Even I did this today and that made me really happy, and think, oh, actually, yeah, that there have been really good times in my life, and looking back, I think that can be really helpful for people. I think
for my husband, post-surgery and treatment, setting little targets, and when you achieve that target, that actually, going back to the depression, actually you think, oh, I have done that, and that actually lifts your spirits a little. And as you say, if you then, the next target, you can manage to reach that one. So it's helping you physically and emotionally.
Yeah, set those goals for yourself
Yes,
in a way
yes.
to reach those
Yes.
goals. Absolutely.
And I think sometimes it's quite a little thing that perhaps you haven't been able to do for quite some time, and suddenly, I've done that.
I've done that now. I think one of the biggest goals that I would maybe suggest is actually allowing yourself to feel the way that you do. It's okay to feel low, and it's okay to feel happy. It's okay to feel all of these emotions that we was talking about at the start, both good and bad. It's absolutely fine to feel that, and once you have that acceptance of feeling, oh yeah, okay, it's okay for me to feel like this. I think that might be, a little bit of a step in the right direction. And it's like we were talking about that recognizing that if you can't get out of that low feeling is actually getting the help that is available for you. Communication, how do we feel that we were talking about communication before?
I would recommend it. It helped me to actually talk about it, because yes, I was stubborn, but once you do start talking, then people realise that they can help you, and you are bringing yourself out of a little bit of a low mood as well. So definitely talk to it. In fact, I probably talked to anybody who listened. But it helped me, and I'm sure they didn't mind.
I think that communication, sometimes when I speak with people, they say, well, actually, I don't feel like I can talk to the people that I love, and especially actually family members, they say, well, I can't talk to the person who's going through it about it. But actually, from talking to others, actually when they did start talking to their loved ones, they were like, oh yeah, we were both feeling really similar actually, and so we did something together, and that made us both feel really a lot better. But it is sometimes the case that you don't feel like you can talk to the loved ones, but that doesn't mean that communication has to stop there. There are other people that you can talk to, whether it be through counselling or your GP, or there are other people. There are also telephone lines. So there's obviously the Macmillan line that is 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. 7 days a week. The number for that is 0808 808 0000. And I think that it's a really important telephone line. It's just somebody there that on the other end of the phone that doesn't necessarily know you, but that is more than happy to just listen to what you may be feeling at that time. But I think, is it fair to say that those feelings don't just stop at 8 o'clock?
No, they certainly don't.
I think they often can get worse during the hours of darkness, and
Especially when you can't sleep.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Because
Things
you become
wearing
more
on.
low then.
So there are obviously other 24/7 services. The Samaritans, there are a number of services that are available, but obviously the Samaritans is just one of those. They're available 24/7, and they're free to call off a landline or a mobile on 116 123. However, if you would prefer emailing them, you can actually they have an email service as well, which is Joe, just spelled JO, @samaritans.org. And if you email them, it may take up to about 24 hours for them to get back to you, but someone will get back to you. And that might just be a bit beneficial if you didn't physically want to speak to somebody. Sometimes typing we can find typing a bit easier, and it's something that's available for you to access, absolutely. And while we're talking about typing away, there's obviously the Macmillan Online Community Forum. That is 24/7. Has anybody heard of the Online Community Forum?
Yes, I have. I did have a dip in and dip out, but I found it a lot of information in there. It can get a bit mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But it's also helpful to read the feelings and emotions of others that are in the same place as you are. So it's worth a look.
It's a platform that people can go on who may be going through something similar to you, and it's just an opportunity to speak with that person and talk about, actually, well, I feel like this. Is anybody else feeling like this? And before you know it, I'm sure you will come across somebody who goes, yeah, I'm feeling that too. And it's about gaining that support. It's just another platform for you to be able to go to for that support. There are obviously, if you've got a mobile phone, a smartphone, there are mental health apps as well that have been approved by the NHS. There's one called Catch It. Catch It is helps you manage your negative thoughts and look at the problems differently. There's also one called Silver Cloud, and that's an 8-week course, and it helps you manage stress, anxiety, and depression, but at your own pace. So there are mental health apps out there that you can access if you have that facility to do so. Going on to maybe that support that we were talking about, so maybe talking about visiting your GP, they may recommend some counselling maybe. Is anybody happy to talk about, did anybody go to counselling or access that service?
I certainly did, but I was referred to the Haymarket Centre to speak to the specialist cancer counsellors there. And I was very fortunate that I had a very, very good therapist, and she's the one that helped me out the most.
So the Haymarket Centre is obviously at Shrewsbury Hospital.
Yes, yeah.
So that's obviously local for people within Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, but there are absolutely other counsellors out there that can be accessed through your GP, or if you go into what we were saying about before, the Macmillan Information and Support Service, if you either ring them or if you go in and just drop in and speak to them, they'll be able to direct you in the right place to be able to get counselling around you. It may be that in your area you have to go through your GP. That's completely normal as well. And so it might be that the GP themselves says, okay, well, we're going to refer you to this counsellor. And it's just that opportunity it's a talking therapy, I suppose, isn't it? Of being able to talk about what you're experiencing in your life, and maybe talk about how you can move forward in your life. Cognitive behavioural therapy, it's thrown around quite a lot, isn't it? CBT. Has anybody heard of CBT?
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I've heard it can be very effective. I haven't been through it myself, but I know one person who extols the joys of being through the course and has come out of it very well. So it is a good thing to have if it's right for you.
Absolutely. It's a talking therapy that can help you manage your problems by changing the way that you think or you behave. It aims to help you deal with the overwhelming problems in a more positive way by breaking them down into smaller parts. Unlike other talking therapies, CBT talks about current problems rather than focusing on issues from your past. And it looks for practical ways as well, which I think is really important. Live in everyday life, think about those practical ways that you can actually improve your state of mind from what you have been going through. The other thing that the GP may suggest, and it might be a combined, or it might be the medication itself, is something called an antidepressant. I don't know if anybody's heard of antidepressants. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of uncertainty behind antidepressants, and I know from speaking with people in my job, they say, oh well, what if I become addicted is the biggest worry, concern. What if I become addicted? What if they make me feel sick? Can you think of anything else that people might think?
Will they make me drowsy?
Drowsy.
People are often put off because a lot of tablets, you need another tablet to counteract some of the side effects.
Yeah.
And it's just a roller coaster with that.
Yeah.
So that they're put off taking the tablets in the first place.
Yeah. That kind of that concern of I'm just going to end up on a lot of medications, and I've already either I'm going through or I've been through a lot of treatment already, and it's just one more thing for me to maybe even remember to take in some cases. But I think it's really it's fair to say that it's completely natural to have those concerns about any new medication, not just antidepressant, but any new medication that you put on. But speak to the person who's prescribing that, whether that be your GP or your consultant or any kind of doctor who's prescribing that. Talk to them about those concerns. I think sometimes you just need that reassurance that actually well, I can't guarantee that you're not going to feel sick on them, because there's no guarantees, unfortunately, when you do start taking a new medication, that may or may not happen. But I do think that if those side effects do start to happen, go back to your GP and you talk about those concerns. Don't just stop taking your medications, but make sure that you see them as an urgent case. Ring the GP surgery and explain that you're a patient going through these things, through cancer treatment, and explain that you need to speak to them about the side effects that you're experiencing, and they will help you. Whether it be starting another medication to counteract it, or it might be that there's a number of different antidepressants. It might be just because one doesn't work for you, that actually by trying a different one, that might actually be better for you. And it goes back to getting that support that's available.
Yeah.
I know that obviously we were talking about the Haymar in Shropshire, but there's also a line, a support line, if you're going through treatment in Shropshire. But even if you didn't have that facility within the area that you're in, there are people that you can go to. So if you are still on treatment, hopefully you have a key worker or a clinical nurse specialist. But always remember that if you don't even have that the GP is there. So go to your GP. Any concerns like that, go to your GP, explain what the treatment that you're going through, and actually I'm feeling really, really sickly, for example. And there are other things that can help with those symptoms. Absolutely, you're not on your own. There are people there to support you, and people are there who want to support you. Now we'll move on to anxiety. Maybe talk about that a little bit. So anxiety, how would you describe anxiety? It's difficult to describe, I'm sure, but how would you describe it?
To me, it was looking into the unknown and not seeing anything, and you feel anxious because you don't know what's going to happen next, especially at the end of the treatment.
Yeah.
I felt as though I was cast adrift by the hospital, when in fact I wasn't. It was just the end of the treatment. But I was really anxious about what I'm supposed to be doing next, what I can do next, and who can help me do what I want to do next. And it does cause anxiety, and it doesn't help.
Absolutely. I think for me, I think it's fair to say that everybody, regardless of whether they've got a cancer diagnosis or not, everybody at some point in their lives will feel anxious. Different types of anxiety, and not types necessarily, but different severities of anxiety. So it could be you're waiting for some results, or it might be that you're about to take a driving test, or going in for an exam, or you're waiting to hear news that a baby's arrived in the world. There's all that kind of different kind of anxieties in the different reasons for having that anxiety. But people can feel that, anybody can feel that anxiety, but I think it's at the stage where you are unable to control that anxiety, that it starts to become a little bit more of a problem. Because once you actually have that answer, whether it be, we've had a baby girl, or whatever it may be, that anxiety then goes. Whereas what you're saying there, and correct me if I'm wrong, is when you finish that treatment, the anxiety doesn't necessarily go. It might settle, but it's an underlying thing. Is that fair to say? Or
It is, yes, because there are so many variables that you can't get an answer to all of them. So it just builds up on your anxiety. You may solve one little problem, but there are plenty of others that will crop up in your mind because you don't know.
I think where my anxiety is and where it comes from is because you've gone through your cancer treatment, and it's any sort of niggle or ache or pain or headache or whatever that's a new symptom. You're anxious that it might turn out that you've got the cancer's back again.
yeah, that anxiety of recurrence.
So I think that's where my little niggles come from and my anxiety comes from.
Yeah, I've heard that a number of times. I must admit that like you say, any kind of niggles or pains or headaches or anything like that, it automatically you think, is it back? Absolutely. What kind of things do you think that you might feel when you're feeling a bit anxious?
I haven't had cancer, fortunately. Members of the family have. I think sometimes it's quite difficult to actually recognise a feeling that you are going through. And then you think, oh, perhaps that's what it is. You know, so I find for me it's sometimes not realise, you suddenly realise you're not breathing properly. You're sort of, it's not deep enough. And there's a lot of, and you realise you just haven't been breathing normally, and you think, oh, come on, you know, and you're trying to do something about it. I'm not sure that we're all always necessarily able to recognise anxiety when it hits you. Until something, and you think, oh, right, well, yes, that's probably what it was about. And then it's trying to do something about it.
Absolutely, yeah. That rapid breathing or sweaty palms or that feeling that your heart's absolutely racing. It feels like it's just here sometimes, doesn't it? Like literally just that overwhelming feeling, I suppose, of your heart racing, sweaty, that rapid breathing, or like you can't necessarily get your breath sometimes. Like it doesn't matter how hard you try, you can't catch your breath. Maybe feeling a bit restless, a little bit worried, trouble concentrating.
Yeah, it's not being able to settle on anything.
Yeah. And
Flitting from thing to thing. Instead of just, normally you just think, I want to do that, and you get on and do it. But you just can't seem to focus properly.
And escalating a problem sometimes as well. So it could be a tiny problem actually that really can be easily solved. But actually, because of that anxiety in your head, it all of a sudden creeps out of control, and all of a sudden you're thinking, but what if this happens? And then if that happens, then what if this happens? And then that anxiety can just get out of control, which is where then you start to have that kind of worry, and even more worry, in that those kind of heart palpitations maybe.
It's overthinking something.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You keep searching for an answer to everything that goes through your mind, don't you?
And on all the variables as well.
Yeah.
If I do that, what will happen? But if I did that or I didn't do that, what will happen? And it's a big maze.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a big maze. And I think that, and in most circumstances, I think it's fair to say that most people, not everybody, most people will be able to rationalise what you're thinking about and think, okay, let's go back and think that wouldn't happen. Let's think about a way to solve that feeling of how you are feeling. But not everybody can do that, and it's at that point that if you're unable to do that, or if it gets out of control, again, like we were saying, it's about recognising that, and at that point going and seeking some support. Again, whether that be from the Macmillan Information and Support Centres or whether that be from your GP. At this point, I would advise maybe going to your GP, because they are a healthcare professional that will be able to give you that support and be able to point you in the right direction of extra support that's available for you, and to help you with that anxiety.
I would also say, going back to the communication we spoke about before, talk to your friends and family as well. Because I used to lay there sometimes at night thinking of quite a number of things, but I didn't want to disturb the wife because she was getting up for work next day. But when I did talk to her, it's fine. And once you did start talking, the anxiousness just drifts away.
Really helped.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
And it's two minds thinking of the same outcome.
Communication, and it's very similar, and there are a few things that overlap with how you can help yourself with depression and anxiety. There are a few things that can overlap, so communication being one of them. I think it's such an important factor to be able to help yourself, that communicating and telling people how you're feeling, and they're there to listen. They're happy to listen as well. It might be that they don't necessarily understand, but that doesn't mean that they won't listen and try their best to understand how you're feeling.
Yeah, I mean, did you find that there were times when finally your wife perhaps asked you a question or wanted to discuss something with you, but had put it off for quite a long time.
Yes.
And discovered that in fact you'd been thinking exactly the same thing, but you hadn't communicated it either.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what
that's
happens,
true,
because
right.
you don't want to say anything because they're concerned anyway. So the last thing you want to do is make it worse.
Yeah.
But I think you reach a point where you think, I'm going to have to talk to them about this, and then you discover they have been thinking about it, but and you were worrying about them not thinking. I mean, it's just it becomes so convoluted.
Yes, they don't want to worry you about it in case you hadn't thought of that. Then it's
Exactly.
something else.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah.
It's like what you were saying earlier, Claire. You're constantly worrying about them. They're constantly worrying about you, and actually, if you just talk about it, talk through it, that actually you both realise that you're feeling similar, not the same, but similar, or worrying about similar things, but just by talking it through, you might be able to come to a end solution together.
Yeah.
And you will start realising that some things are normal.
Yeah.
It's not just you, it happens to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just help yourself.
Absolutely, and I think that's help yourself is one of the biggest things, and it also gives you that sense of having a bit of control back in your life as well by doing things for yourself. So obviously other things that might overlap from the depression is the physical physical activity that can help with that anxiety. Going out and gaining, actually you start to gain confidence after you've done a bit of physical activity, and then what we were talking about, building it up slowly. Well, then that builds your confidence, which actually makes you feel quite good about yourself, and quite rightly so. And it's just like there are similar things. The mental health apps, which I've already spoken about, the Silver Cloud and Catch It. That's another thing. But also maybe exploring local groups that are around you that may be able to help you. Is there a mindfulness? If you're at that point in your pathway, to go to a mindfulness course, is that mindfulness, is there one around you, and they're the kind of things that you can find out from your local Macmillan information centres. Is there a living well session near you which can talk about similar things about what we're talking about today? Actually, it might be that they talk about the emotional well-being. It may be that they differ within different areas. But yeah, is there a living well session around you that you could go to? The Macmillan support line, the Samaritans, the online community. There are other forums as well. The other thing is a journal just for yourself. If you're feeling low, maybe just by actually writing those things down, and then walking away and actually coming back to them, you can sometimes go back to how you can manage those sensibly after you have tried to calm yourself down a little bit and actually go back, okay, let's think about a solution here.
I struggled with writing journals, but what I did find helpful was taking selfies. I know it's quite a popular thing to do these days, but I would maybe take a picture of something that represented how I was feeling, or I'd take a selfie of my face or something else that expressed what I was thinking, what I was feeling about. So for me, going through the photographic process or picture process, images, worked for me as much as writing a journal would work for somebody else.
Expressing how you're feeling through pictures, absolutely, yeah, what a fantastic idea. Because I think a lot of people like going around now taking pictures, whether they be selfies or whether they take pictures of their surroundings. Yeah. So, people do enjoy taking that. If you do drink alcohol or caffeine, maybe cutting down on them, or if you are a smoker, maybe stopping smoking or accessing support to be able to help you to stop smoking. Just the reason that we say this is because they are stimulants as well as alcohol is a depressant itself, actually, which if you are already in that low mood, it will just enhance that low mood the more that you drink. And I think it's a really difficult thing to realise, because I think that sometimes you think, I'll have a drink and it'll all be merry, but actually it can have that opposite effect. So being aware of the amount of caffeine that you drink, the amount of alcohol that you drink, and if you do smoke, then the benefits of of stopping, of quitting that of smoking. And I think just finally, going back to the journals, what we were talking about is there's something that I do personally, is every day I write down 3 things that make me happy, just from that I've had from the last 24 hours. And I think it's nice to go back and think, oh yeah, that did happen, that is nice. And the courses that I run at the moment, I ask people to do that. If we have time, I ask people to do that, and some of the answers that you get is lovely. But you know, you just have to think about other things that made you happy, and it's just a little memory thing as well. When you look back and you think, oh, look at all those wonderful things that have happened in my life as well. Thank you ever so much for watching the emotional wellbeing part of this film. Thank you also to Angela, Colin and Claire for taking part. I hope that you have found something that has been useful for you. We've spoken about emotions, the different types of emotions that you may have felt or you are still maybe feeling. We've spoken about depression, the common signs and symptoms, and what you should do if you do feel that way. We've also spoken about anxiety and similar things, the symptoms of what anxiety is. But we've also spoken about what you can do for yourself, but also the support services that are available for you. If you do feel like you need any further information, we did supply you with the Macmillan support line. That number is 0808 808 0000. They're not just there just to listen to you, they're there to provide advice if you need it. So just give them a ring if you feel that will benefit you. Or drop into your local Macmillan Information and Support Centre and speak to somebody if you feel that there's something that you need help with or advice about. The next video, following this emotional wellbeing section, are 2 coping techniques. The first one being the butterfly hug and the second being a visualisation exercise. Both are coping or grounding techniques to help you if you are suffering from the effects of anxiety. Thank you again for watching.